can only pour as fast water in this bottle as the opening itself allows to get the water into the bottle. So that's kind of the constraint of how the water bottle itself is constructed. And but for impediments, it's that kind of a blockage. You cannot move forward at all. And so what you do then? So that's the difference between what's a constraint. You can still move forward just in a different way, or maybe you're kind of throttling along, and versus an impediment. Having said this, both can be at times though resolved or bypassed to make further progress. And both can be of a temporary, prolonged, or indefinite nature. So whatever it depends on what the constraint is and where in the context the constraint is living in. So also at times an impediment can slowly or gradually just become a constraint. So when you had a blockage before, think of it like a dam where the water is, the dam is holding the water, so the water is blocked to flow through. But then eventually maybe the pressure of the water starts to, or maybe it's just raining really hard, and then the pressure of the water eventually cracks the dam. So now the water can start flowing through the constraints of the holes that were made in the dam. So the dam is not anymore the impediment, it's just a constraint, but the water can continue flowing now. Another example I can give is flying. We used to flying. We have a constraint as human beings, the Homo sapiens, that we are not designed structurally to fly, right? It's most of the birds, except for the chickens and the hens and the penguins, right? They cannot fly, even though they look like they have the and we have this constraint too, like for a while it used to be an impediment for us, and we could not fly. But what did we do through our curiosity, through innovation, through constant trying and not giving up, no matter how many times we as a Homo sapiens failed. And but we learned from every time we tried, we learned. Elon Musk just put out there, right? We have actually passengers being able to fly even. That's an accomplishment where thousands of years ago, we could not even think about for us to be able to do something like that, right? There are so many, like in methodology, you see stories about how someone tried to fly and then fell down, putting feathers on themselves, right? To try to imitate how a bird flies, and we failed so many times, and then the other planes, they evolved, and then now we even can get onto a rocket. So this is what I mean, where an impediment, you cannot really say it's definite. That's why it could be like indefinite, and eventually through progression, the impediment can become a constraint, and eventually the constraint itself is broken, and we are now in a totally different world. So why do we focus on constraints associated to a product or service? So what we focus on, and it's not just in the business world, I try to bring it back to the business world, but also to the personal life. Whatever we do, we as human beings, it's a psychological factor that we feel more satisfied if we produce something that is of value. And with that, what the theory constraints what constraints help us do to realize uh, what can be accomplished now, where do we want to go, and it's a catalyst of us to be innovative and to come up with creative ideas. Okay, here's where I am, but I want to be there at this point B, and how do I get there? So this is how constraints can help. Constraints can also help regarding systems thinking, which are called thinking 360 degrees, because you want to make sure um, as you fix something, you don't break something else as a side effect, right? Because then what have you really fixed? And you can also, with that, during your planning or before you even start anything, if you think of constraints, then you can identify already early on challenges. And those challenges, they may be then documented for you as risks, or just as something they're not really risks, but some things to keep in mind that you need to take into account as part of your planning and execution. And thinking of and executing negative testing. So if you already know you have a particular constraint, um, it helps also, excuse me, it also helps with built-in quality, and a quality, built-in quality from the beginning, from the inception of when an idea that you have is born, all the way through execution and further. And the constraints also help in identifying waste, because once you address what your constraint is, then you want to make sure that whatever solution you want to find is effective. And in also ensuring that you have a successful launch and sustainability. Like if you, for example, there were in the news at some point, or at least I heard it, where a company creates ads in the US, and then they put the same ads in a different country. And those ads were not taken very well because the constraint, basically the cultural understanding was not taken into account. So they didn't take this particular aspect into account, that people live in a particular environment, and the way that, so even though it was something innocently that was being broadcasted, because they did not them, but they learned from that constraint, and they made improvements so that they could re-advertise in a better way and get the customers. So these are the things I'm sort of talking about, how constraints can be associated to a product or service. And let me see. Okay. So who had the idea of the theory of constraints? The gentleman is Dr. Goldratt, and he shared this idea in the 1980s. It's process related, and it's a decision making technique. And throughout the years, I mean, we are now in the year 2020. So, and as we know, ideas are keep being built on, and which is a good thing, because that's how we generate innovation, right? Innovation is nothing more than keep building on each other's ideas, on experimenting and trying it out and seeing how far we go, and then checking on the results, and then seeing, okay, is this working or not? And sometimes people also do in certain circumstances, for example, when it comes to medicine, um, they don't just roll something out right away. They observe for a while because of safety, because of the constraints of safety reasons, right? And it's really more about, we do not know what we do not know. So that's why then certain regulations come into place for particular reasons. And so in this particular case, the theory of constraints, it has been applied, as you can see on the screen here, in so many different areas like production planning or production control. It has been used in lean manufacturing, like the supply chain management. It has even been applied to accounting and or performance management. So it's all, you see, it's all different lines of work. Some are more mechanical driven, some are more process driven. It's also applied to portfolio management and business management, and that's just a few. I haven't listed everything out there. And the examples that are applied to, it's not just for information technology or for lean manufacturing. You could apply it to hospitals because it can also be applied to processes. And the military has used it. Educational institutes have been using it, and any other not-for-profit organizations. So it's very versatile. Just like Agile is very versatile, so is the theory of constraints. So what does this theory of constraints actually say? So the theory, a lot of things, even if we are not aware, we take a lot of things for granted. For example, 2 + 2 is 4, right? We take it for granted. And why do we do it? Because we were taught like this. Who came up with that idea? Someone came up with that idea, and it was kind of propagated, and everybody accepted it because, like, yeah, it makes sense, it's logical, and I'm sure they had a system for it to come up with that idea. And so everyone just basically absorbs it as if it were true. And in science, science itself, when a person is scientific, it does not mean necessarily that a scientist is speaking truth. I don't know, maybe some of you already knew that. For some of you, it may be something new. Science, what science really is saying is, from the understanding that I have, with all the information that I have, and the things that I'm experiencing, these are the present effects I see, and the causes, and then which again generates effects. And this is really what science is communicating about. And science does have assumptions. And if the assumptions are true or not, we don't really know, right? So, I mean, just as an example, thousands of years ago, we thought we would not be able to fly. But now, in 2020, we can fly around the orbit. So it's a totally different perception. And why is it? Because throughout our evolution as a Homo sapiens, we keep learning. Our learning never ends. And this is why, this is again a theory, so it's a food for thought to just give you a different perception of what is happening with you and around you, and how you react to a certain environment, but then also to help you with your own growth mindset, of how you can influence or come to different solutions. So the theory itself is basically anything we create, whether for business or for service, lives within a system or system of systems. Let's take Earth. Earth is a pretty big system, right? It's a very complex system. And Earth itself is a system of systems. We have so many different species out there. We in our ecosystem, right? We have animals, we have plant life, and then we have us, basically our industrialization and going into the digital world. So we have a pretty complex system that we're working in. And on top of it, though, Earth also has its own system, like the atmosphere we're living in. Earth itself, I call it a system of systems, but outside of Earth, we also have the sun, the solar system, right? And then, so it depends on where you want to look at, but I'm just keeping the scope down to Earth for now, coming down to Earth. So with that, just okay. So with that, um, every system has a particular purpose. In order to, we need to first understand how a system actually functions, and then also to understand its purpose itself. And otherwise, if you want to improve anything, we don't really know. If we don't understand how a system functions and what the purpose of the system is, we can make as many sessions like at work, right, as we want, but it would not be relevant. It's not aligned with what it actually is, or and how it actually works. So that is the key thing. Otherwise, I mean, it's just like bringing up something that's that would have any particular impact to the purpose of the system itself. So the whole time and energy spent on something that basically doesn't have any impact would be a waste for you and everyone else. So, and this comes back into built-in quality. So as you see while I'm talking, I'm not just looking at quality from in regards to defects, or like malfunctioning or something like that. I'm also looking at the quality of value itself. And taking this into account, once we understand how a particular system functions and what its purpose is, only then we can identify, okay, this is what the purpose is. How is our reality right now? Are we actually, is the purpose of the goal actually met? And if not, then we can do the gap analysis. And then only from there, we can actually understand, okay, here's the gaps, here are the issues, which ones are in constraints, which ones are impediments. Yeah, so and here as the example I'm giving is like, for example, our system is Earth ecosystem. It's a system of systems, and our goal is to maintain a healthy, thriving ecosystem. This is a global goal. And the data we collect, which that's where science comes.
जल्दी पानी लेके आए सारा ये वाला इसको दो वाला पानी दे दो अभी उठ के भागेगा जो भागेगा भगाना है ना अभी खुद खुद मस्ती करती है देखें
Unmute. I don't know. Okay, I clicked on something. I don't know if everyone was able to hear me. So basically, the data, what I was trying to say is our system with Earth, the goal is to maintain a healthy and thriving ecosystem. That's a global goal for all of us. And data, this is where the scientific method comes into place, helps us to collect the data to help us understand better, have a picture about it, and so that you can measure, okay, this is where we are today, and is this really what we're trying to have we met our goal, or where are we, well, where's the gap? And then based on the ratio of the pollution and the waste and the population of various species, if they're for example, if they're endangered, or the habitats, how do the habitats look like? That's where we can figure out whether globally we're meeting the goal, not just locally. So that's what I wanted to kind of convey. When you look at constraints, or when you try to find a solution, that's where systems thinking comes into place. Maybe it looks a pretty rural area, but does that mean that just because it looks pretty rich in Brazil or US or in Europe, that it looks as rich in Africa? So this is what we need to keep into account, because we're looking at the system globally, not just locally. And okay, so going to the next phase. So that's a theory that Dr. Goldwright is talking about. And now we're getting to the theory of the constraints. So once the two other things that need to be identified, once the goal and the function of a system is understood, and then the areas of improvements have been identified as part of the gap analysis of the now and the to be, only then the constraints that are relevant to meeting the goal come to surface. And even about the goal itself, as I mentioned before, I would highly recommend to read the novel The Goal, just to understand of how to even form a meaningful goal. Because again, we're talking from inception all the way through execution and delivering about built-in quality. And so in a nutshell, a constraint, after having a sound understanding of the system and what it's aiming to achieve, and then evaluating whether it's meeting its goal. I'm also checking on the time. Okay, yeah. So what does it say, and how does it help me? So Dr. Goldwright came up with this five-step process. I'm sorry. Yeah, it came up with a five-step process, and I just wanted to clarify that there is an assumption that every system has some sort of a constraint. We always, around us, we always live, whatever system we are in, it doesn't matter if I live here in America or other people live on the other side of the continent, we always live with some certain kind of constraints. Like COVID is a global constraint. We all experience what COVID is doing to us. So that's a common global constraint. And so there is every system has some sort of a constraint, and it is important though to prioritize the constraints by its relevance and the impact on the goal, to the goal itself. Just like usually do the prioritization of when we have requests coming in for work at work, right? We have so many requests coming in, or even at home, like we have so many people requesting things from us, right? And which is a good thing because it means people value us, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be requesting things from us. But then at the same time, you need to prioritize for yourself. And it's the same with the constraints. Always look for value, for the value. And so that based on like the 20, I always like to refer to the 80-20 rule. Focus on whatever you want to address, focus on that has the most impact. And Dr. Goldratt happens to say the same thing. That's why he wrote so many books about it. And so as part of the first stage is, before even all this, before we even get into all this, it's really the 5 steps. Again, it's basically forming a meaningful goal, not just a temporary goal, but a really meaningful goal. And then to also understand how the system is supposed to be functioning. And if you're coming to a corporate world, if you're a consultant, you want to help people, you want to transform people, people's mentality from the traditional mindset to the agile mindset, then as we all know, we first need to listen and understand before we even can make any suggestion, because every company even has their own culture, just like every family has their own culture, because it's their own ingrown culture, kind of, right? It's like a biologically grown culture. I don't know how else to call it. So it's the same before we even get to. Only once you understand how this business system works and what the goal of this business is, that's then when you can start identifying the system's constraints. And once you've identified it, then you get into the of deciding how to exploit the system's constraint. Exploit is a very strong word, but really what it means is basically, how can I move forward? What can I do to alleviate all this? And in order to do that, that's where you get to the step 3 of subordinating everything else to the decision. I will give you an example of what I mean with all these different steps. And then at as the next stage, you elevate the system's constraint. And then once that constraint is broken, basically it's dissolved, there is no this constraint is not existing anymore, then you start all over again. So as you go through this, this is very similar to in the agile world, but then also in the waterfall, even in regards to lessons learned and what do we do with the lessons learned. And also in the agile world, when you do retrospectives. So, but it digs this topic here, the theory of constraints, it goes deeper into the subject itself by making sure as you go through the checking, it helps you to focus on quality. How are you actually checking? It's not just, don't just go through the mechanics of 2 + 2 is 4, but what is the meaning of the checking that you're actually doing? What is the meaning of the progression you want to do in your personal life or in the business life? So this is what this is really focusing on. And so bringing it back to the agile world, like when you have a lessons learned or retrospective, you usually start off with what has been going well, and then what can we improve. But do people actually think about, when they talk about it, do they think about the actual goal? of what they're actually trying to achieve? Or are they just randomly just collecting things that just comes into their mind, and we're just putting things out there, and a number of those things are actually have nothing to do what we're actually trying to achieve. So it brings, what this does is it brings quality to the retrospectives themselves, or the lessons learned themselves, so that we can continuously improving. Then also decide how to exploit the system's constraint. In some companies, that was a while ago, when a person would not perform, right, they would the person would get fired. So they thought issue is resolved. But that was just that's sort of like a local thinking, because reality is, whoever the person is who has been working with the peers is kind of integrated with them. And I've personally experienced when I've been working in different companies, and it used to be the in this culture here, it used to be kind of like the norm, right? That if you don't perform, then you just get fired, because it was easy. It was easy to do. And but then now with Agile, there's a mindset shift. It's not about I, as my title, have the power to do something to you. It's more like it doesn't matter what title I have. As a servant leader, let me help you. Let me create the environment for you, so that you as a person and you as part of the team can succeed. So this is what I mean with decide how to exploit the system's constraint. And in the Agile world, what happens is, for example, a team, there's a dedicated team, let's say 10 people, and one of them gets sick. They self-assign themselves to a task, and they got sick. The person got sick. What do the people do? They huddle together and they try to get the work done that the other person could not complete, because, well, there was an illness. And at the end of the day, the whole team delivered, and it was the person who got sick did not get reprimanded for being sick. I have personally observed that in a corporate culture before, where a person was laid off because of being sick too often, which is not helping the person, of course, for getting better, right? The person is already sick. Now the person is being laid off, and how is the person who's supposed to be paid for the medical bills? So these are the things, this is where we talk about built-in quality, to think more systemic and not just for the particular occasion. And with that, of course, you don't want to always have people jumping in into a situation. Well, the sickness situation is one thing, but for example, if a person is not skilled enough to do a particular job, the person asks for help. And you don't want to keep jumping in to do the work for the person, right? Because then you are being taxed and you cannot do your own work because you have something else to do as well, right? You cannot be always the leaning shoulder and to carry people along with you, because you're not really getting far. So what we do in Agile is to subordinate everything else to the decision. Basically, we do also knowledge transfer in Agile. And this is how it's then this way, the person who didn't know everything that you, it's a win-win for both. It's now you can move on with other things as well. You helped another person, which is a great deed to do, right? You can never measure a great deed with any money, right? and the other person is moving along as well. That way, we are creating, as individuals, a healthy social system. And then we elevate the system's constraints. That's what I was mentioning, getting into. So once as you go through the process of doing knowledge transfer, then you're being really, and basically the constraint is not there anymore. And with that, then you get to the fifth stage. You eventually are able to, you don't have that constraint anymore. And now you can look at, okay, what else? What else is there that's holding us back from flying around the orbit, right? Remember, we started off as Homo sapiens, hardly knowing how to, whatever tools were available to us then, right? Stone and wood and branches, basically, right? And leaves, that's what we started off with. And then now we are living in houses, and we also build rockets. So that's kind of where it comes back to. So as I mentioned, I give some little examples about how it can be, the theory of constraints can be applied to Agile. It can be applied to Kanban for flow efficiency. And one of the examples I provided a moment ago, it's like in Kanban, for example, the expedite lane. And it's basically when something high priority comes in, you have a lane on the Kanban board that's called expedite. And what it means is everyone knows that all hands on deck, get this work done as soon as possible. And all the team members come together and they work on this high priority item, information technology, and no one can access the internet. Then everyone huddles together and makes sure that the internet is up and running again. Or value stream mapping, which is used for basically helping reduce waste. So that's also where the theory of constraints can be used, to always focus on what do you as a customer really want to achieve? What's the purpose of this business that you created? And what is your goal? What is your vision? Where are you trying to go? And as you're mapping out your business process, and then also the the supporting tools and information technology process that you have, is it helping? Is every step along the execution of what you actually try to accomplish, does it have meaning? And how are we addressing it? And the same for Scrum. Scrum is focused on providing value, right? And so we want to make sure we build in quality from value perspective. The scaled Scrum, in this particular case, scaled Scrum is referring to to less. I'm so sorry. Scaled Scrum is referring to less, and it's to identify systems constraint. Is basically a more complex environment where the simple Kanban or Scrum may not be working so well. So you need to have a more complex mechanism or framework in place to address all that as a company. And then you also have scaled Agile, which is from SAFe, which kind of needs to look at the same thing to identify a system of systems constraints for time to market. And with all that, what it does is it helps you in, when you look at constraints, it allows you to bring out your creativity and to become innovative. But also, what I like about the theory of constraints, it's about learning. Oh, I'm missing actually one screen, but that's okay. It's about learning and to constantly improve and to have an open to have a growth mindset, to be open to different perspectives. That also comes into whenever you make a change. As I let me just go back a few slides here to this one here. On paper, it looks very easy, but when you want to implement change, it's so hard. I mean, how many times have you personally tried to make a change, right? You're tired of a particular habit that you have, and some of the habits are easy for you to change, to basically for you to grow into a different person. And some of them you keep doing them again and again and again, and you're tired of it, but you keep doing it and you don't know why. And that's basically what we wanted to make sure that it's not so easy, but and sometimes we get this inertia, well, if I do the change, then what about this? What about that? What about that? And we fuel fear into ourselves, which then becomes, again, an additional layer you just created. Whenever you create fear in yourself, you just created an additional constraint, ironically, for yourself instead of moving forward. So this is what the theory of constraints is communicating. And with that, yeah, so learning not alone is not enough. It's not about, you can learn anything, but the key is whatever you learn, is it meaningful? Is it of value? Is it helping you? Is it helping you improve? And so this is basically what I wanted to leave with you and see for yourself how you resonate with the theory that Dr. Goldred came up with. Thank you so much for your time.
We hope that everyone feel inspired with this webinar session, and maybe after watching this short talk, you might feel in tune to your classical tunes. Thank you, Geeta, for taking out your precious time for our community. I really appreciate the way Geeta describes the constraints through involving realistic and normal examples. So thank you everyone for joining webinar series second topic. And this was really inspiring, Geeta. It was really nice. I really enjoyed the talk. And we hope that everyone liked it, and you will join us for our upcoming next webinar sessions as well very soon with same energy and new amazing speakers. Thank you everyone.
Namra, do we have any questions? We need to also check if there's any question.
Yeah, I have checked through our social campaigns. We don't have yet, but if anyone would like to have any questions with Geeta, so let's come up. Okay, so we have one comment from Vikas that thanks. Okay, Bushra have one question. Yes, Bushra, please carry on. Let me unmute you. Yes, Bushra.
Hello, Geeta. It's Bushra here.
Hey.
I have a question related to solutions. Sometimes actually we find alternatives for the constraints, and sometimes we find the solution. So, and same with the impediments, right?
Right.
So what's how we can, what's the better way to, not confuse ourselves, and why, what is a better approach to go with?
So I hope I understood your question correct. So in general, whenever you find a constraint and you try to solution it, do look at multiple options. And then whenever you select an option for the solution, it's basically kind of like a pilot. It does not necessarily implementing that it actually will work. It may or may not work. You just have to try it out. And then only afterwards, once you have piloted it by implementing it and executing it, then you need to revisit it again. This is also very important. You need to revisit whether whatever solution you thought would work out was actually impactful. So it's not necessarily a lot of times we think, okay, yeah, we got our action items, we agree on this, and then we're going to just move forward. But then people forget about, okay, so now that we implemented it, let's measure or let's see how impactful was it. So there is never really just, there's also another thing. 2 plus 2 is 4, but 1 plus 3 is also 4, right? So it's not like there's only one solution available for a particular circumstance. Usually there's more than one option. Is really about, when we come to solution, is what is the team or what are you most comfortable with? Are you comfortable with getting outside of your comfort zone for that particular solution that you want to implement it? Or do you want to take a more step-by-step, small step-by-step, and just gradually get out of your comfort zone itself? Does it answer the question that you were asking? Hello.
It's a yes from Bushra.
Okay, good.
Okay, Geeta, there's one question from Vakas, and he's asking, can we say that TOC is part of Lean?
Yes. Basically, Lean has incorporated TOC. That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So is there any question from anyone else? Okay, so I believe it's no. If there is any, so feel free to post on our in our social channels or groups, so we can answer accordingly. And thank you everyone again for joining it, and thanks again, Geeta. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Geeta. Thank you, everyone.